Okay, so we're in 2 Samuel chapter 20, and we're going to start with verse 4. And just to remind you, David, let's just give a bit of context. David now is towards the end of his reign, and he's had nonstop troubles. And in a certain, shall we say, moral or religious way of looking at it, we can date his troubles back to his very problematic actions with Bathsheba. And after that, things just start going downhill. And what does he have? He has one of his sons rapes his sister. We have another son killing his brother. And then we have Absalom coming back. And David thinks there's some level of peace between them. And then Absalom, of course, leads a major rebellion against David. David has to leave Jerusalem. And then it becomes a civil war. And eventually David does, and his people prevail. And David comes back to Jerusalem. And in the process, Joab, who is David's chief of staff, kills Absalom. Okay. Finally, at the end of chapter 19, we see that David finally returns to Jerusalem, takes his position again as king in the palace. And I would just point out one verse that becomes extremely relevant to what we're doing today, and that is in chapter 19, verse 16. The king started back and arrived at the Jordan, and the Judites went to Gilgal to meet the king and to conduct the king across the Jordan. This is part of the special effort that David makes to ensure that his own tribe, Judah, is with him in this return to Jerusalem. No, wait, I've not 16, verse 14, okay? Now, 16 is something we already know about, but verse 14, this is what's important. In the process of bringing back the people of Judah, he says, he's sending messages. He says in verse 12, speak to the elders of Judah, okay? And then he says in 13, you are my kinsman, my own flesh. And then he sends a very special message in verse 14 to Amasa. Now, Amasa is his nephew, he has Joab and Avishai are sons of Tzruya, his sister. Amasa is son of a different sister. Okay, so he's also a nephew. They're all related. But Amasa, unlike Joab and Avishai that remained loyal to David, Amasa was loyal to Absalom. Okay, and now he's in the process of bringing Amasa back to be loyal to him. And so he sends a special message to him. He says, and unto Amasa say this, you are my own flesh and blood. May God do thus and more to me if you do not become my army commander permanently in place of Joab. So in the context of him bringing back Amasa, Amasa declares his loyalty to David, and David is saying to him, you are going to replace Joab. Keep that in mind as we go ahead now in chapter 20, and we read what happens next, okay? So here in verse 4, the king said to Amasa, same Amasa, remember? Now, at this point, I don't think he's the chief of staff. He's just a senior soldier, senior commander in David's army. And the king gives him a particular job. They are now dealing with the new rebellion, a rebellion of Sheva, son of Bichri. Like we didn't have enough trouble. We had, in the course of David coming back up, we also dealt with Shimei, the son of Gera, who cursed him, and then he apologizes, and Joab says, well, we really should have killed him, and David says, no, don't kill him. And we have a sense that David is trying very hard now not to make newer enemies and try to make peace so that he can solidify his kingdom again in Jerusalem, which is what he's doing, okay? And you have to see also that his bringing Amasa into his army is part of that same thing. Okay, I'm not going to kill him because he stood with Absalom. On the contrary, I'm going to appease. I'm going to find a way to bring him back loyally to me, and part of that is making him a senior commander. And eventually he promises him to have him replace Joab. Okay, so now he gives him a job in this battle against the newest rebellion. Okay, at the end of end of chapter 19, he's like sitting in Jerusalem, but now we see already he's got a new rebellion to deal with. The king said to Amasa, call up the men of Judah to my standard and report here 3 days from now. So he's basically saying to Amasa, gather the troops. And he says specifically, gather them from Judah. Okay. And Judah is, he's looking again all along. He's kind of trying to rebuild his kingdom using similar approaches that he did when he first tried to build his kingdom when he was still involved in a civil war with the descendants of Saul. And then too, he was based in Judah first and then moved on to be king of the whole kingdom. And here he is doing the same thing in using first the people of Judah in order to fight against Sheva. And we will remember Sheva is a Benjamite. So he's kind of going back to the old divisions. Okay, when he was fighting that civil war against the house of Saul, it was Judah against Benjamin. Okay, and all these other people follow Benjamin, but those were the two main tribes fighting against each other. Now he finds himself again in a new rebellion being led by a Benjamite. So he is now going to call upon Judah, feeling that there would be that old loyalty to defend against the Benjamites. Okay, so all of that is part of that. And he tells them, gather yourself an army and come back here in 3 days. Amasa went to call up Judah, but he took longer than the time set for him. He came back late. He didn't come back. After 3 days, he wasn't there yet. So David doesn't want to wait. So what does David do? And David said to Avishai, Avishai, you recall, is Joab's brother, okay? He doesn't say to Joab now. He doesn't say, okay, Joab, I'm going back to you. No, he goes to Joab's brother, Avishai. So David said to Avishai, now Sheva, son of Bichri, will cause us more trouble than Absalom. I don't know why he says that, but he clearly feels that there is a huge danger in this current rebellion. So take your Lord's servants and pursue him before he finds fortified towns and eludes us. The idea being, what do I mean fortified towns? He has his men, he's rising up against David. But if he goes into a fortified town, then it's going to be much harder to get him or to fight against him, because then you have to lay siege, and that's a whole long protracted process once somebody is within a fortified town. Joab's men, the Kratites and the Platites. Now, we talked about these people in the past. These are members of David's army, and some of them we saw when David was fleeing from Absalom, remained extremely loyal to him. These are not of the people of Israel. These are from other peoples that live around there, but have shown remarkable loyalty. They may have begun as mercenaries, but they show remarkable loyalty to David. So this is part of Joab's army that he puts together, and all the warriors. In other words, he has his whole group marched out behind him. They left Jerusalem in pursuit of Sheva, son of Bichri. They were near the great stone in Gibeon when Amasa appeared before them. Okay, so Amasa's late. They've already put together their army. Amasa's late. They're not waiting for him. And now all of a sudden Amasa is coming, and it's very possible that they left Jerusalem. They're going towards Gibeon. Gibeon is Benjamin. We've seen that area before. And it's like just north of Jerusalem in the territory of Benjamin, northwest of Jerusalem. And Amasa appeared before them. Now, what he probably was doing, he went south to Judah to muster an army there, and he's coming north, and before he heads east to Jerusalem, he encounters that army. And he's probably saying to himself, oh, great. I got my force, he's got his force, let's go do the job, right? But what happens? Joab was wearing his military dress with his sword girded over it and fastened around his waist in its sheath. And as it stepped forward, it fell out. His sword falls out. Okay, he's armed and his sword falls out. Okay. Joab said to Amasa, how are you, brother? And with his right hand, Joab took hold of Amasa's beard as if to kiss him. Amasa was not on his guard against the sword in Joab's left hand. Okay. So basically, it seems here that there were two swords. One was obvious and fell out, and the other one is underneath on the left side. No, in his left hand. Okay, so this is, we've seen, people are usually use their sword with their right hand. They take it from the left, they pull it out with the right hand. The one that was his regular one fell out, but he didn't notice that he had another sword in his left hand. He took his right hand, grabs his beard as if to kiss Amasa. So Amasa assumes this is friendship. This man is coming to him, this chief is whatever, Joab, whatever his position is right now. He's coming to him of love, of friendship. But actually in his left hand, he has a sword. Okay. Amasa was not on his guard against the sword in Joab's left hand, and Joab drove it into his belly so that his entrails poured out on the ground and he died. He did not need to strike him a second time. Here we have, and actually that's like the end of the story, but it's in the middle of the verse. The verse continues. Joab and his brother Avishai then set off in pursuit of Sheva, son of Bichri. What's going on here? Okay. Joab kills Amasa. Why? Why does he kill Amasa? So I just want to throw this out to you. Why he was late. David had given him the job to muster troops. He was late. Then he said to Avishai, you do muster the troops. Avishai did this. Okay. Well, actually, did Avishai do this? No. Joab ended up, he had said to Avishai, take your Lord's servants. And then we learn Joab, okay, that it was Joab's men who go out after Avishai. And then the next thing we see is Joab seeming to take control and killing Amasa. Why did Joab kill Amasa? Thoughts?
Because you said in 19 verse 13 that because he knew that David was going to replace him.
Yeah.
That is why I read that verse, because it's a very good reason. It's very possible that he knew or understood. I don't even know that his comment to Amasa, he sent someone to tell him. He sent someone, so we don't know if that was a secret or not, but let's assume that he knew. He knew that David was already positioning Amasa to replace him. What Joab definitely knew was that David had initially asked Amasa to lead this battle, and only because Amasa is 3 days late, and then he doesn't turn to Joab, he turns to his brother Avishai. So it could be David never said to Joab, I'm firing you, but clearly what Joab is witnessing is a series of actions on the part of David that is in the process of replacing him, or certainly, putting him down in rank a little bit and upping the rank of some of these other people instead. So that's one reason.
Sondra,
yes.
Could it be, do you remember you talked about at the end of the reign that David says to Solomon to deal with his people? Do you think that David is really starting to sideline Joab now, not wanting him to be in command, anybody but him, to put him down completely?
I think that no question, and I want to go. Well, when we finish this story today, then we're going to go and look at that in
Right.
First Kings, what David says and what he says about Joab. But I think, given what he does say about Joab there, and what we've already seen him say to Amasa, he clearly has had enough. Look, Joab killed Absalom.
Yeah.
And David had specifically said, go easy on Absalom. And it's not exactly clear, what did he mean? Did he mean be kind to him, don't kill him, take him prisoner, kill him with mercy, which definitely wasn't done. If you'll recall, he took a long time to die. Joab did not kill him, painlessly. He took a long time to die. But, it's not clear, but I think there's certainly reason to believe that David's in the process of getting rid of him. Why didn't he then just say, okay, Joab, I've had enough of you today. Why don't you retire? And we are now going to have Amasa and Avishai co-command the army, or Amasa will be the chief and Avishai will be the second in command, whatever. He didn't say that either. Okay, there's some kind of it's not clear really what's going on. Okay, so one possible motivation for Joab is that he is not happy. He's jealous, whatever. He's angry. He's not happy with the threat that Amasa is presenting to him, and therefore he decides to do away with him. Is there another possible interpretation?
I just think that Joab always felt he had the control over David and influence because he'd seen the letters written about Uriah.
Yeah, I remember you did point that out, and it's very possible. But I think it is possible. I'm not sure if it's the preferred interpretation, but it is possible to view Joab in a more complimentary light and perhaps say when he sees Amasa coming before him with a full army that maybe Amasa is a threat. Don't forget, Amasa was Absalom's chief of staff. It's possible, okay, that when he says to, when David says to Amasa, bring up, report here in 3 days, it's possible that Joab doesn't know about that. And Joab only knows when David, after the 3 days pass and he didn't show up, and then David gives the mission to Avishai. So it is possible to say that Joab here made a mistake and killed Amasa because he thought that he was coming in as a threat, that he hadn't really, become loyal to David. So again, we can view this negative, we can view it positive, and I think that's really up for grabs. Okay, verse 11.
Sondra,
Yes.
is it possible that he wanted to take David's position?
Joab?
Yes.
I don't think Joab never pretended to be king. I don't think he realized that to be king, you have to be anointed of God. And a king is also, unlike a different kind of leader, and we saw this in the past when we first talked about Samuel anointing, and he didn't want to have a king. And we talked about the possibility of the term that was used, Nagid, in Hebrew, and that it's possible that what Samuel was more interested in is a leader, but not a king. And what's the difference? A king means that his sons inherit. So I assume here that Joab was not looking to become king because that would have meant a complete break with the whole idea of the dynasty of the house of David, and really to destroy this whole idea of a king and a bloody overthrow and all that. But don't forget, Joab had tremendous power over David just by virtue of his being chief of staff. And David had come to rely on him in many ways. And I think we're going to see this now as we move on in this story, the problem that David has. On the one hand, he wants to get rid of Joab. On the other hand, he can't. He needs him. Okay. And I think this is what we're going to see here. And I think Joab is very happy in that position. He wants David to need him because then he becomes the power behind the throne. And sometimes the power behind the throne is a lot more fun than the throne itself. Okay, so let's continue verse 11. While one of Joab's henchmen stood by the corpse, okay, he had killed Amasa there, and called out, whoever favors Joab and whoever is on David's side, follow Joab. So you have the killing of Amasa is clearly presented by Joab and his men as Amasa is a threat to Joab and a threat to David, okay? That's how he's presenting it. He certainly is not presenting it is that Amasa was a personal threat to me because I was afraid he was going to take over the army, okay? So clearly that's how it's presented. Amasa lay in the middle of the road, drenched in his blood, and the man saw that everyone stopped. And when he saw that all the people were stopping, he dragged Amasa from the road into the field and covered him with a garment. So you have here a sense that on the one hand, this fellow, one of Joab's, commanders or whatever, clearly thinks that when you see Amasa is dead, that will become a positive message to the rest of the army to follow Joab. See, Joab doesn't, if there's a threat to David, Joab's going to take care of it. So all of us guys, we're on David's side and we're on Joab's side and we're going to keep moving. But all of a sudden he sees that the actual presence of Amasa's dead body is disturbing. And the army is not moving forward. It is stopping. It's looking at the body. And it's almost as if there's an expression of they're wondering what is going on here. Was Amasa really, a danger to David? You get this sense of the questioning actually the people. And when this fellow understands it, he says, okay, I gotta get him off the road. And he covers him up. So it no longer becomes this problem. He thinks it will be a rallying point for Joab and David, but it turns out it's a problem. So he doesn't really bury him. He just covers him. Once he was removed from the road, everybody continued to follow Joab in pursuit of Sheva, the son of Bichri. Sheva had passed through all the tribes of Israel up to Abel of Beit Ma'acha. So this is up in the Galilee. Okay, they're up north. And all the Be'erites assembled and followed him inside. And Joab's men came and besieged him in Abel of Beit Ma'acha. And they threw him against the city, and it stood against the ramparts. Okay, so basically what happens, this guy, Abel, goes all the way up to a city called Abel Ma'acha, and he goes inside. And this is exactly the thing that they were concerned about earlier. David had said, go catch him before he finds a fortified city. Well, guess what? He found a fortified city. And he goes into this fortified city, okay? And so what happens when your men come? They lay siege to this city, and it stood against the rampart. This is what do they do? They surround the city, and then there's they build a rampart, a way like a I don't know, what would you call it? It's I lost the word. A path, a slanted path up a hill, a slope. Thank you. It goes up this slope path they build. This was a classic way. If you look at if you've ever been to Masada, by the way, there's two ways to get up to Masada. One is that snake path, right? And then the other side is what they call the Roman
rampart.
path. That's a rampart. They built that so that they could go up and climb over the wall, and so that is a way to you take the city under siege and then you enter the city. Okay. Now, and then it says, and all the troops with Joab were engaged in battering the wall. So you also have some kind of a battering ram or some kind of thing. In other words, you're going up this path, and then from there you're trying to break a hole in the wall. And what happens? A clever woman or a wise woman shouted from the city. Now, this is our second wise woman that we read. Remember, where there was a wise woman from Tekoa that Joab had brought in order to kind of tell a story, and she, through her wisdom, is part of Joab's plan to bring David to a point where he's willing to forgive Absalom and bring him back. And this is, of course, before the rebellion, is to forgive him because he murdered his brother Amnon. Here we have another wise woman, but it's somebody who is going to be communicating with Joab. She's not his tool. She is a wise woman. When we discuss the wise woman from Tekoa, we question how much of what she said was what Joab told her to say, and how much, at what point did she depart and just kind of, figure out what to say next, using her wisdom in that way. Here, it's all this woman, and the way the scripture tells us, it gives her 100% credit for the way she handles this. Okay, so a clever woman shouted from the city, listen, tell Joab to come over here so I can talk to him. He approached her, and the woman asked, are you Joab? Yes, he answered. And she said to him, listen to what your handmaid has to say. Okay, so she immediately speaks to him from a position of modesty. I'm your handmaid. Okay, so as opposed to coming up against him, she understands that if she's going to get anywhere, she's got to come. After all, they are under siege. He's got the upper hand right now. She's got to come before him in a way to kind of mollify him. Okay, I'm listening, he replied, and she continued. In olden times, people used to say, let them inquire of Abel, and that was the end of the matter. Okay. So basically, she's presenting Abel as this, it was a very powerful city. It was a very important place. We never had a threat because people admired us so much. I am one of those who seek the welfare of the faithful in Israel. But you seek to bring death upon a mother city in Israel. Why should you destroy the Lord's possession? So she is viewing this siege as an attack on the whole city of Abel, which is what it seems to be. The whole city is in danger. And she's saying, why are you trying to bring death upon this whole city? And the way Ir v'em Israel, it says here in English, mother city. It literally means a city and a mother in Israel. Okay, it is an expression that from here we take it and use it in modern Hebrew, and the idea is a city in Israel is almost human. Okay, a city has meaning. It's not just a geographical point. The fact that we, the people of Israel, and if I am bringing a modern Zionist point to this, so be it. But this is how it rings to me. The fact that we, the people of Israel, have succeeded in creating a Jewish city in the land of Israel, that's significant. You don't want to destroy that. Let's figure out if we can fix this in some other way, okay? And she says as follows. So Joab replies, far be it from me to destroy or to ruin, not at all. But a certain man from the hill country of Ephraim, named Sheba, son of Bichri, has rebelled against King David. Just hand him alone over to us, and I will withdraw from the city. The woman assured Joab, his head shall be thrown over the wall to you. So first of all, one thing I want to point out, he says from the hill country of Ephraim, when we know that Sheba is from Benjamin. So there's two different explanations that I saw to that. One is that the hill country of Ephraim, the actual hill country itself, goes beyond the territory of the actual tribe. Okay, when you talk about the hill country of Ephraim, even today, the hill country descends down. It's the same hills that descend south towards Benjamin as well. So it could be he's referring to the geographical area of the mountain of Ephraim, which includes Benjamin. Or it could be that while this man was a Benjamite, he also happened to live somewhere in Ephraim, which is also possible because there was a lot of back and forth between those neighboring tribes. All right, but basically, Yoav makes it very clear, I have no interest in killing the city. I just want one man. You give me this man, you're all free to go. And she was very interesting. She goes further. She doesn't say, okay, I'll give him to you. She says, I'm personally going to kill him. Okay, I'm going to throw you his head. And that's exactly what she does. The woman came to all the people with her clever plan, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it down to Joab. He then sounded the horn. All the men dispersed to their homes, and Joab returned to the king in Jerusalem. So this was the end of the battle with Sheba ben Bichri. Actually, the fact that he went into a fortified city ended up being better. Joab used it to his advantage because instead of fighting tooth and nail against people on a battlefield, the fact that he had taken refuge in a particular city endangered the whole city, and he was able to say to the people, to this wise woman, I'm not here to endanger the whole city, just give me the one guy. That's very interesting, by the way. There's been many, many discussions over the centuries about the moral issue in general. I'm not put this aside for a second, the moral issue in general, if you are approached, whether as part of a, in Jewish history, very often it would be part of an anti-Semitism kind of thing, to, force the Jews to give up fellow Jews, and then they would be promised they would save. I mean, the most recent example of this, of course, was the Judenrat during the Holocaust, when the Germans set up these committees of Jews, and he said to them, you will be saved, but you've got to draw up the list because I need X thousand people every day for the transports to go to the death camps, to Auschwitz. And it's very, very controversial. The Judenrat, I think most people believe that initially the Judenrat really believed that they were in a position to save some Jews. And in order to save some Jews, they were giving other Jews. Of course, at some point it became very clear that this wasn't working. At the end, of course, everybody was shipped off, including the Judenrat. But the question is, what happens theoretically if you are, and this, it wasn't just theoretical. In the case of the Holocaust, it actually happened. What happens if someone comes to you and says, okay, there are 1 million Jews here, okay? I can kill all 1 million, or you can give me 1,000 and then we save the rest. What do you do? Do you give up 1,000 people to save, 990 million, 990,000, or do you say, no, we're not playing this game, okay? Now, Jewish law has said very clearly, you don't give them up, except in a situation like this. And they learn from this story of Sheva ben Bichri. And the story, and what is this story? They didn't say, give me one and you save the city. They said, give me Sheva ben Bichri, a son of Bichri. We're just looking for this particular person. And this particular person is guilty and deserves a death penalty. What does Joab say? This particular person rebelled against the king. And everybody knows that when you rebel against the king, you deserve to die. That's the punishment. So from Jewish law, we learn that if an enemy says to you, give me 1,000 people, you say no, even if that means 990,000 will be killed. You're not to play God. You don't enter that game. However, if an enemy comes and says, give me one person, this person, and I want him because he's a criminal, then you can give him to him, and in that way save the city. The question remains is, what if they come and tell you, give me this one person by name, but they don't tell you that he's guilty of something? Are you then allowed to save the city when they ask for a particular person by name? And that is a question. That remains, a debate. We don't have to debate that today, but I just thought you might be interested in knowing how this story itself became the basis for a whole ethical, legal discussion over centuries of how Jews handle this kind of situation. Okay, and then we can just finish the last 4 verses. Joab was commander of the whole army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Yehoiada, was commander of the Keretites and the Peletites. Adoram was in charge of forced labor. Yehoshaphat, son of Achilud, was recorder. Sheva was scribe, and Sadok and Aviatar were priests. Ira, the Yairit, also served David as priest. End of the chapter. What do these last verses tell us? They tell us that finally David is back in charge. He's back in Jerusalem. This is the end of the rebellions, and he has a very organized staff. He has civilian, people who are forced labor here is actually it's tax, but the tax was, people then didn't pay tax in money as much as they pay tax by certain hours of work. That was your tax. You had to work a certain number of hours for the palace, for the king, for the kingdom, etc. So there was somebody in charge of that tax. There was somebody in charge of the government administration, and there was people in charge of the army, and there was the scribe, and there were the priests, and everybody had their job. This is the best way of saying the kingdom has gone back to normal. David is back on his seat. All is well with the country, except Joab is the head of the army. David tried to get rid of Joab. The Amasa is killed. Okay. He then appointed Avishai. Joab already pushed him aside as part of the battle against Sheva. Joab is in charge. You have a sense here that on one hand, David is sitting pretty on his throne, but he needs Joab. He needs Joab. And I just want to, I know we're a little over time, but I just want to go and read the last instructions of David to Solomon before he dies, because I think it tells a great deal about what he has in mind, and here you have a sense he has no choice. He cannot secure his kingdom without Joab. But what does he really think of Joab? So if you look at 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 5. Further, you know what Joab, son of Tzeruiah, did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's forces, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Yeter. He does not mention the fact that he killed Absalom. He understands that that was justified, but he does not forgive him for killing Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Yeter. In both cases, these were people who had been against David. David succeeded in bringing him back to his side and assuring their loyalty and promising them safety. And in both cases, Joab undercut that, it wasn't just that it was an unfair killing of these people, but it made David look like someone who would not hold to his promises. And that's very, very serious. Okay. Next, what he said. He killed them, shedding blood of war in peacetime, staining the girdle of his loins and the sandals on his feet with blood of war. So act in accordance with your wisdom and see that his white hair does not go down to his grave in peace. Okay. In other words, kill him. Okay. And then he talks nicely about somebody. And then in verse 8, you must also deal with Shimei, son of Gera. Remember him? He's the guy that rebelled. And then David said, no, I'm not going to kill him. Joab wants to kill him. He says, no, we're not going to kill him now. But he says here, the Benjamite from Bahurim, he insulted me outrageously. I was on my way to Machanaim, but he came down to meet me at the Jordan. I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to the sword. So do not let him go unpunished, for you are a wise man and you will know how to deal with him and send his great dart down to the grave in blood. Again, you have a situation where, like Joab, Shimei was the same issue. He deserved to be put to death. But at that point in time, David decides it is better for him to put down this rebellion, let bygones be bygones, because that's the best way for him to secure his position and returning to the throne. So when Shimei ben Gera apologizes, he says, okay, I'm going to accept his apology. So he binds himself not to hurt him, but he understands that he remains a danger. And so we have these two people. I think it's not just how he felt about them that's important here, but what's important is the fact that he clearly wanted to kill him while he was still king, but he couldn't because he had a weakness. Even though he came back to his throne, he was not strong enough to be able to kill both of those and still remain a strong king in Jerusalem. And so I think that tells us something about, and at the end, of course, what we just read at the end of our chapter, the fact that Joab is in charge of the army, which is clearly not what he wanted. But this is okay. Now this chapter really ends the story of David. The next chapters, which we're now almost at the end of 2 Samuel, the next chapters are seen as a certain kind of addendum, not necessarily in order, adding certain things, and we will take that up next week. Next week's chapter is, in my opinion, one of the most difficult chapters in the Bible. Get ready. Any comments?
Your last chapter, could you just give me the reference that you've just been talking about, please? I missed it.
Were the David's instructions to Samuel, to Solomon?
Yeah.
1 Kings chapter 2.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, that's it for today, and we will see you all next week, please God.